Hi, home. Hi, Nashville. This is my friend Ruth, and
this is my friend Anne.
We are very excited to be here and to be doing this tonight. I finished Ruth's new book, My Kitchen Year. Is it The Kitchen Year or My Kitchen Year?
My Kitchen Year.
I finished it on Sunday night, and I thought I've never in my life had the experience before of finishing a book and thinking, oh, I wish I could interview this person on stage. I wish I could just sit here and ask you all of these questions about the book. So and we're friends, and we've known each other for a really long time. So this is kind of the absolute best case scenario. I am a Ruth Reichl completist. I have read all of your books, except that cookbook. I didn't read Is still available?
You know, you can find old copies of it.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. It was a very small printing, and it was 40 years ago.
Okay, so I shouldn't feel like I'm doing a bad job as a friend by not having read it.
No, but
okay.
I will send you a copy.
I would very much appreciate, just for the set, the feeling of the set. This is a strange, it feels strange to say this, but this is really my favorite book of yours. And I guess the reason that it feels strange is it is marketed as a cookbook. And so you wouldn't sort of put a cookbook up against your friend's memoir or your friend's novel that you love so much. You want to jump in at any point?
Yeah. My husband thinks it's my best book, and he has zero interest in food.
He's got to have more than zero interest in food.
He's a hard news guy. I mean, really, given his choice, he would eat cheeseburgers 3 times a day. And that is not a joke. That is absolutely true. But he said, this is, you sort of put your whole self into this book, and it's everything you've always cared about. The whole notion of getting people back into the kitchen, and he said, you just all the things that are important to me, like the notion of finding joy in ordinary things. I mean, it's all here. And, I have trouble writing. I don't find it an easy thing to do. And this book was easy. I don't think I'll ever write another book that's easy, but this one just happened really naturally. I mean, there's nothing about it that was strained. I didn't have a lot. I mean, it was also kind of accidental in that, one, I didn't set out in the beginning to write a cookbook, so it sort of came together in a natural way. And then I didn't want photographs in it or drawings. And so when Random House insisted that there had to be photographs, I hired a photographer I thought I would want to work with, but I never said to him, we just said, take 20 pictures of 20 dishes each season. And, he said, okay, it's just going to be you and me, no food stylists, we're going to do this in a really honest way. But I never said to him, oh, and while you're at it, take pictures of me cooking and take pictures of the driveway. He just did that. Nobody, it was just on his own. And then when the designer got it, she just used them all, which we had never anticipated. So in some ways, for me, what I miss most about the magazine is collaboration. We would all work together, and you'd take an idea and you'd throw it up in the air, and everybody would push it higher and make it better. And I really miss that. And this book happened that way. It sort of became our book, and everybody had a little piece of it and made it better. So there was a kind of joy in doing this that you don't usually get with a book. And
it's a kind of joy, and you don't usually get a kind of joy in a book that is a book about depression.
Yes.
And the balance between the depression and the joy is astonishing. And the way this book is set up, there's a tweet. We'll talk about the tweet thing later. That's mystifying to me. Although there's sort of these beautiful little Zen koan tweets. Then there's a page in which Ruth is more or less saying, I'm in bed, feeling like a failure, wonder if we'll lose the house, decide to make a pork shoulder, pull myself out of bed. Here's how you make the pork shoulder. And I read every single word of this book, which is strange. I certainly in my life, and not because we're friends and not because I was being conscientious about tonight, but because I was so interested in how you were writing about food. And you were writing about food with great joy. Your food language, your vocabulary for talking about boiling things is enchanting. So there's tweet, depression, joy. Tweet, depression, joy. In very small packages over and over again. You take things that, for me, would be very complicated and hard in these recipes, and you have this way of making it just seem effortless. I've never seen anybody write recipes the way you do.
Well, okay, recipe writing is mostly they're marching orders. You know, you go by these things, and then you do bing, 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 bing. And to me, it should be a conversation.
And that's exactly how it felt.
And I wanted the recipes, you know, after years of being a food editor and sort of, you know, having this sense of you have to put it in this rigid frame. I want all cooking to sort of like burst out of that. And for me, the big part of cooking is, you know, pay attention to the sound of water when it's boiling. And you know, look at when you peel a peach, there's a color under there that's so amazing, and it's hidden until you peel it. If you bite into a peach, you'll never see it because it's right beneath the skin. And there are all these moments in the kitchen, and I wanted to say, you know, when you're doing this, notice this. I mean, these are the things that work for me and make every day worth living. And so I thought hard about, are they going to let me do this? Are they going to let me write the recipes in this way that is not normal? And in fact, I had somebody test the recipes. And when she tested them, I said, and can you put them into ordinary recipe speak? You know, make a shopping list and then, you know, put 1, 2, 3, 4. So we had all those, and I thought, you know, okay, I will say to Random House, if you think we need to have this, we can have an appendix in the back of the book for people who need that. And to my great delight, they said, no, we're not going to do that.
I really believe that, and sort of like intellectually I don't believe it, but when I'm reading the book, I really believe that this is what you made on this day when you got out of the bed in this funk.
It is.
It really is.
It is. I mean, okay, so I didn't
like that scene where you make fudge sauce. Seriously?
You get up in the middle of the night?
You just really got up in the middle of the night and made fudge sauce?
I did.
Damn.
I did. You know, I got up in the middle of the night, and I was like, I couldn't sleep. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, you know, I'd really like a hot fudge sundae.
Wow.
Because there are times when you really need to indulge yourself.
Yes, and that has to do with the whole depression, joy, back and forth, and why this cookbook feels so different. It's like you are truly writing it for yourself, which is why I think it was easy and why I think it's so brilliant. But you aren't kneeling to any Americans' ideas about what's going on with food now. That first recipe in the book for those little potatoes that you boil in cream and mash and then put an egg in and pour more cream on them, and I just think, and you're like, and you could put bacon and a little cheese on top. Like, where have you been? I mean, it's like the Mad Men cookbook. I sort of pictured you there with a cigarette and a martini and, you know, stirring this stuff. And then the next recipe is for chicken liver pate. And I'm thinking, Ruth, what's going on, girl?
I think, you know, we spend way too much time worrying about what we eat. And if you just stay away from industrial food, you're fine. You just eat real food and it's fine.
Okay, this is what I really want to talk about for the whole time that we're on stage, because I really struggle with this. There is so much butter in this book, and so many moments when you say, use as much butter as you feel...
As you can bring yourself to use. Yes.
Right.
It's,
anywhere between a half a stick and a stick, depending on how brave you're feeling at the time. There is, in our world now, this enormous division, camps for food. And your camp is the camp that's getting squeezed out, which is food for pleasure. There's food for medicine. There's food for morality and world justice. And there's food, you know, for socializing. But that, I feel like you're really writing about food for taste.
I am. And, but, you know, I'm also, I mean, there's a lot about sustainability and, you know, I mean, I'm very much am behind the idea we should eat locally. We should only, if we were eating animals, we should only eat happy animals. You should support your local farmer. I mean, there's a lot about cook with the seasons. But I also think, you know, we've made ourselves crazy in America.
Yeah, about me. I've made myself crazy.
You know, and you know, every year, the pundits tell us, you know, eggs are good. No, eggs are bad. You know, now, you know, for years everybody was drinking skim milk. Now everybody's saying whole milk is really better for you. I mean, my husband sent me a text this morning saying, you have to stop taking calcium supplements. They've just discovered they're really bad for you.
You heard it here first, friends.
And you know, in the light of all this, I mean, I feel like we need to have some common sense about this. And food is, you know, one of the great pleasures of life is eating. And we've sucked all the pleasure out of it and replaced it with fear and artificial flavors. And I really do think that you should make food that you love, and you know, if you eat less of it, if that's what you need to do. But if you eat really satisfying food, a few bites are fine. You don't really need to eat a mountain of it.
And I didn't get the feeling in this book that your primary joy was eating this food.
It isn't.
It was cooking.
It's cooking and feeding other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I enjoy cooking probably a little bit more than most people, but I feel wildly oppressed by it. Anyone here with me on that page? I mean, just feel like when my husband says, I have a meeting tonight, I mean, my first thought is like, oh, I don't have to make dinner. You know, it's just frantic, my desire for him to go away. So I don't have to feed him. And I'm sorry that I got caught up in those gender stereotypes and that I'm feeding him it all anyway. And I do enjoy that. I enjoy the cooking, but I feel so squashed by it. And you seem to meet it with graciousness and open-heartedness every time. And there is a moment in this book that I mean, literally, my jaw dropped. You are down in the depths of your sadness. Do you know which moment I'm going to bust out?
I don't.
And your husband says,
oh,
would you make me some Thai noodles for lunch? And you say, how lucky am I to be with this man who loves me so much that he knows that making Thai noodles, and I'm thinking, I would leave someone if I was in bed, crushed by depression, and Carl called up, "Hey, sweetie, make me some Thai noodles." I would tie those Thai noodles. Another problem I have, because this is really all about me, I can only hold 5 or 6 meals in my mind. I feel, does anyone else have this problem? You know, I can remember how to cook 5 or 6 things, and then something will fall out of rotation, and then it'll come, but the expansiveness with which you seem to go to the kitchen every day and just make something new.
Well, you know, a lot of that is because another part for me that I'm hoping people will pull out of the book is that I think the shopping is part of the cooking. And so, you know, I'll go down to the butcher and he'll say, you know, look, we just got this great pork shoulder, or have you ever cooked lamb neck? And
and your answer to that question?
And my answer to lamb necks is I've only done it once. It was really tedious. You got a recipe for me? And you know, you go to the cheese shop, and you know the cheese guy will say, actually at the moment he's like really excited about all of the great cheeses coming out of Missouri. You know, and he'll say, you know, there's this great cheese place, and they make this cheese, and you go, well, okay, so I've got this cheese. What do you think I should do with it?
Yeah.
And I'm constantly getting recipes from other people. You know, you stand in the produce counter, you talk to the farmer, go to the farmer's market, and they've got, you know, beautiful shishito peppers, and you say, well, what do you do with these? And so there's a lot of other people just sort of giving me suggestions.
But that's open-heartedness on your part. I mean, it's being open-minded and open-hearted to see what's there, to ask, to interact.
Well, see, part of what I'm hoping this book is about is that, and I think why people get tired of cooking, and why when I was a gourmet, you know, it would be 7:15 and Michael would be saying, you know, when are we going to eat dinner? And I'd like, oh, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go home and make dinner. And you'd get dinner on the table as fast as possible because everybody's starving. And we do all this results-based cooking. You know, it's all about the result. And in this year that I got to spend in the kitchen, I got to have the journey instead of the result. And, you know, part of what I realized, I made a lot of mistakes. I cooked a lot of bad food.
You didn't mention that.
I didn't mention that.
But, you know, that's writing, too. I write a novel, I write a lot of bad pages. I don't include them in any appendix. This is the junk that I wrote that didn't turn out so well.
But, you know, I mean, a lot of these, you know, recipes are the result of, you know, something like I have this eggplant salad I really like. And it took me 3 or 4 tries to figure out how much lime I really liked in it, or that I really wanted to use palm sugar instead of brown sugar, that it really tasted better. So, but, you know, that was, you know, to me, it doesn't matter if everything doesn't come out okay. You know, everybody says, oh, you should never cook anything new for a dinner party because, oh my God, you might give your guests a bad meal. So what? You know, I mean, they didn't come to have dinner. They came to be with you. And, you know, even the greatest cook in the world is going to make something bad once in a while.
That's very comforting. Okay, talk to us about Thanksgiving and the turkey. We know each other from Gourmet. We met when you first got that job. I was one of the first people you hired, I think.
Yes, because we were on book tour at the same time.
Yeah.
And I said, you could, if you can write The Magician's Assistant, you can write about
kale. So every year you had to invent a new way to cook turkey. You tell the turkey story, because it's a great story.
Okay, so before I got to Gourmet, I was the food editor of the Los Angeles Times. And, you know, it's like every food editor, every food magazine editor, every year you've got to come up with some fantastic new way that's going to excite your readers, some fabulous new way to do turkey, and you worry about it all year.
Do you remember when I know you remember, when there was Satan in the turkey?
When there was, yes.
That was huge.
Yes. We had a beautiful turkey on the cover, and somebody saw Satan. And once you'd seen it, you couldn't not see it. I mean, I saw it. I definitely saw it. And we got tons of mail.
That was great.
Okay, when I was at the LA Times, so I really like the stuffing cooked inside the turkey. The problem with cooking the stuffing inside the turkey is you have this big mass of stuffing that's shielded by not just the turkey breast, but also the bone. And because all the juices go in, it's got to get to 165 degrees to be safe. It's a problem. The only way to get all that stuffing that inside the turkey safe is to basically overcook the turkey. So one year I had the brilliant notion, we will stuff the stuffing underneath the skin. And I persuaded all of Los Angeles to
You didn't just take yourself down.
To stuff the... Do you know how hard it is to stuff stuffing underneath the turkey skin? It is a nightmare. I mean, no sane person would do it twice. So what I ended up saying was, after all these years of, you brine the turkey, you do it with miso, you do 1,000 different ways to cook a turkey. I have come to the notion that forget about the turkey. What you really want to do is you want to make a mountain of gravy, because the gravy really matters. You want to make wonderful side dishes, really delicious stuffing. You want to make pies. You want to really concentrate on those. And you just want to use the high heat method, which is you put salt and pepper on the turkey, you put it in the oven at 450, and an hour and a half later you take it out. You don't have to think about it.
And is it really better or as good?
It is really good. You will never have a better turkey.
Okay, but then you brine a chicken later in the book.
Right.
Is that a conflict?
Brining a chicken, first of all, is a lot easier than brining a turkey.
It doesn't involve your bathtub.
It doesn't involve your bathtub and packets of ice and garbage bags, and it's much quicker. And you cook a lot more chicken than you cook turkey. I mean, turkey we basically in America cook once a year. Mm-hmm. Chicken you cook a lot, and also, this is a chicken you're going to grill, so you're going to subject it to the grill, which means that it's hard not to dry it out on a grill. So it's worth brining. It is.
All right. The thing that I've always thought about you in the years that I have known you and in the years that our paths have crossed at different events is you have always struck me as the most overemployed person I've ever known. And I think I've even said that to you before. You have more jobs than anyone.
I used to.
Well, used to, but this is all part of the point. You have a very full career as a writer. You do as much as a writer as I do as a writer, and that's the only thing I do. You have
a bookstore.
Well, I haven't had it for very long. In the course of knowing you for all of these years, I didn't have a bookstore. You have a huge presence on the lecture circuit, which we both do, where you go out and you give talks and you make money and you do that. You had a television show. You had Gourmet. You were always writing articles and things on the side. You just always seemed to be going in 10 different directions, doing every direction really, really well. So it's interesting to me that the great crisis about this book is that you've lost a job, because you still had a lot of them.
I wasn't sure I did. Part of what this was about was, I've worked since I was 16. Went from one job to the other. Never looked for a job. The jobs kind of, I wrote a cookbook and then people thought I was a food writer, and it was just like the jobs came to me. Mm-hmm. And I really, I was Ruth Reichl, editor of Gourmet. I was Ruth Reichl, restaurant critic of the New York Times, and suddenly I didn't have anything after my name. I was just Ruth Reichl. And
famous writer, doesn't
I was 62, and I really thought, nobody's going to hire me ever again. I'm never going to get another job. And I really didn't know if I didn't have all those things after my name, who was I? And, the truth was, I didn't get, people weren't calling me up and saying, oh, we'd really like you to come teach this course or write the, there was this kind of deafening silence for quite a while after Gourmet closed. And I was scared. I was really scared. And one of the things that cooking did for me was reground me and make me feel like, okay, there's a core of me that doesn't need the Ruth Reichl comma.
Right.
And I needed to relearn that. I needed to feel like if I didn't have a job, I was still a worthwhile person. But, I didn't just lose a job and go out, we were a family. We were a very tight group of people working at a magazine. Almost, I think we all loved our job. We had a lot of fun doing it. And there were people at Gourmet who had worked there for 35 years. And they all lost their job on my watch. And they felt, so it wasn't just me, it was like all these people lost their jobs, and I felt like it was my fault, that I should have seen it coming. I should have been able to do something to save it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, what could I have done? Why wasn't I nicer to Cy Newhouse? Why didn't I manage up better?
I could answer that question. There are lots of reasons not to be nicer to Cy Newhouse.
But, it really, and so I spent a lot of time just thinking, and the magazine survived for 69 years, right? So it closes on my watch. And so I felt really like I had really failed. And I think it was the first time I failed at something.
Okay, so you had a whole stretch of The Dark Night of the Soul to think about this. And there's an incredible winter in this piece. It's something out of Little House on the Prairie, where Ruth and her husband just get snowed in and they're eating cabbage, and it's very, very bleak. And you're thinking about this. It happened on your watch. What was your conclusion? Did you, when digging through all of your files of the past, could you say, yeah, I should have taken that a separate way?
No. What I said, in the end was, we made the best magazine we knew how to make.
The best magazine anybody made.
We made, I'm proud of what we did.
Yeah.
And, if I could have saved the magazine, if I had done, I wouldn't have done something else.
Right.
But I needed to get to that place of, saying, that we did a good thing here.
Yeah. Well, good. I feel better. I feel better knowing that part of it.
But it just took a while to get to that place.
Makes sense.
And there's this moment where, so the magazine closes, but I have to go on book tour, which was the weirdest time of my life. The next day, I have to get on a plane.
For a gourmet book,
For a gourmet book that I don't get a penny from, and that Michael's going, you're crazy. Why are you doing this? But I was contractually obligated to do it, and so I went off. And so by the time I got back to New York, everybody else had left. My office was the only office that hadn't been packed up yet, because everybody else had packed up their stuff and left. And I come into this gourmet office that is, every other magazine in Condé Nast has come and looted the place. And there are dying plants. And I actually put the scene in the kitchen. I mean, I exaggerated it, but I put it into delicious. That they had locked the doors but left all the food there, so the kitchens were filled with rotting food, and it was the most depressed. I mean, that was really, when I talk about the dark night of the soul, being in there alone in that office was really grim. And then my 4 best friends come swoop in and say, they fly across the country from LA and say, you can't be here alone. And it was this amazing moment for me. I mean, I'll never forget it, that, they came and it was like we just sort of had a pajama party for a week. And they just said, you can't pack your office up alone. This is crazy. We're going to do this together. And meanwhile, we're going to take you out shopping. And, I mean, that was one of those moments where it was like, oh, okay, I have some value. I have friends.
It's really hard to sit up here and hear you say something like, oh, and I have some value. And I think, you, more value than anyone. What was the best job you ever had in your life?
Gourmet. I mean, it was extraordinary. I mean, they basically came to me and said, make the best magazine you can. And I said, are you sure? Because I don't think I'm going to do anything that you really love. And so I said, no, I know what you did at the LA Times with that food section, and I want you to do it with Gourmet. And they let me hire the best people. They let me hire you, and they gave us money. And I said, here's the deal. I'm not going to do focus groups, and I don't like to be micromanaged. So, if you don't like what I'm doing, fire me, but don't come in and start tweaking it. And nobody gets to do that anymore. I mean, it was a dream.
And it's funny because what you're saying is also a good description of your book. It's not about what other people want or how other cookbooks are structured or what anybody is eating now or doing now. It's you. It's the force of your personality and your vision and what you're wanting to do.
Well, thank you.
And you're finding an equally strong response.
Yeah, no, I mean,
to the book.
I'm so moved by the response to the book. Really, it's like I didn't anticipate.
Which has been out for 2 days?
Yeah, 2 days.
2 days?
2 days.
Really good 2 days. Really super 2 days.
But, I mean, my agent and I were calling this the little book, and we didn't have big plans for it. And it's just really nice that people are responding to it in such a good way, which is like very much what happened at Gourmet. My publishers kept saying, you can't run a piece by David Foster Wallace about what lobsters feel when they go into the pot. Nobody wants to hear that.
Let's talk about that. Do you think that piece had... Do you guys know what we're talking about? Consider the Lobster, which then became the title of a book of essays that David wrote. Do you think that piece had any connection to the demise of the magazine?
None.
Okay.
None.
Well, because people have said that.
I know.
I mean, it's sort of tagged...
No, people have absolutely said, that we stretch too far and we're too ambitious, and that... No, I mean, when the magazine closed, it had its highest circulation in its history and its highest renewal rates. So it wasn't the editorial product that killed that. And in fact, and my publisher, when he knew that I was going to write a memoir he said, I want to give you the stack of letters we got on our side about the David Foster Wallace piece. And it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters. And they're really positive. They're actually people saying, thank God there's a magazine that doesn't talk down to us. And, and there were people who didn't like it, but nobody said cancel my subscription.
Did he care? Was he involved or interested in the fallout one way or another? Do you remember?
Not that I know of. I mean, he and I had a huge fight.
Oh, no, I don't know
yeah. I wasn't his editor on it, but he had some stuff in the footnotes about PETA that I said, I can't live with this. It has to go. And Jocelyn said, I can't, he won't budge. You've got to talk to him. And I talked to him and said, I'm sorry, they're crazy people. I mean, this has to go. They're killing people. I can't live with this. And we argued about it. And he said, well, I'm going to pull the piece. And I said, fine, you can absolutely do it. Anybody will publish this. It's a brilliant piece of writing. The New Yorker will take it. Harper's will take it. The Atlantic Monthly will take it. But if you want the people who cook lobsters to read it, you will publish it in Gourmet.
Wow, good for you.
And he caved. Wow.
What did he say about PETA?
He was very admiring of them. Yeah, they were it was wonderful stuff about these wonderful people. Because he had gone to them about all the lobster stuff. But meanwhile, they were at the same time like firebombing people's home. Chefs who used foie gras. And I said, look, I understand that you like them, but I am not going to put in Gourmet that these are wonderful people. I'm sorry, I just won't do it.
Which makes me think two things. One, I've been with David Foster Wallace while he ate a Philly cheesesteak, which I have a hard time making that leap. And two, I used to write for Vogue at the same time, and the security that they had around PETA was unbelievable because they would come in and throw blood on the receptionists and that sort of thing. Buckets of red paint, actually. They didn't throw blood on them.
But it was, for me, it was an important fight because I had never articulated before the notion that it was really important for pieces like this to be aimed at cooks, and it informed a lot of what I did down the road. And every time somebody would say to me, I mean, we did a lot of investigative, we did the first, pieces about why fish farming is a bad idea, and we did, Barry's piece about tomato slaves, which is, and every time somebody would say to me, an Epicurean magazine is not the place for this, I would come back with the David Foster Wallace argument, which is this is precisely the place for it. We need to give people the tools to make intelligent choices about the food that they're buying. And, if not here, where? I mean, and one of the things that makes me so sad is that you are able to read articles like this in many publications, but not the Epicurean magazines have all shied away from it and gone to, fluff and recipes and travel, and they just, nothing of any seriousness makes its way in there. And I think it's in a time when our food system is so challenged, it's really pernicious. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on this,
but I think that's what makes all of this so interesting. If you could have any job tomorrow, if you could be offered your dream job, what would that be?
I would remake Gourmet in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, and try and get the staff back. And I mean, there's just so much there's so much interesting stuff going on around food, so much more interesting stuff than was happening in '99 when I took the magazine over.
Is that possible?
I don't think in today's publishing atmosphere it is.
Okay,
but we're dreaming.
Short of that. I mean, would you ever edit books? Would you ever?
I'm pretty happy writing and cooking, and as long as I can keep making a living at it.
I don't think you need another job. It's just if you think you need another job.
But never say never. I mean, you never know what interesting things are out there.
I'm going to need to open this up to the audience, but I want to ask you, just on a completely different note, you have that pot, that copper pot with your name on it. And it was in the little New York Times video up on their website, and it was in the very beginning of the book. And I wanted to know 3 things: where you got the pot, what kind of gifts people usually give you, because that must be very interesting, and in terms of either kitchen gadgetry or solid kitchen items, what do you cherish and find necessary?
Okay, I'm going to start with the pot.
Please do.
This is a ridiculous pot.
I'm coveting that pot.
But what you don't know about this pot?
Yeah.
It is not just a copper pot. It is a copper pot made by the only man who is a meilleur ouvrier de France for copper. That means, you know, he's won the award as the best artisan in France as a copper maker. And it is lined with sterling silver.
Jeez Louise.
And I got the pot because a friend of mine was trying to buy that company, and she asked me if I would test the pot for her. And so she sent, I didn't pay for the pot. God knows what they cost.
No. How big is it?
Well, I have 2. I have a saute pan. It's like an 8-inch saute pan, and then about an 8-inch saucepan, too. I never use them. These are pots for rich people with servants, because every time you use the pot, it's fabulous because it's totally, you know, when you turn the heat down, it goes down instantly. It's totally responsive to temperature changes. But every time you use it, you have to polish the silver with one kind of polish and the copper with another. And I never use these pots.
Wow.
Ever. I mean, and what I said to her was, these, you should buy the company. These will be great for rich people who never cook, but who want the best. And, you know, the kinds of people who buy, you know, Hermes bags for $50,000
and the $30,000 mattresses that they have in town and country.
Right, yeah. and you know the stoves, the Le Cornu stoves that cost $1 bazillion. We'll all buy them as trophy gifts, and it's a brilliant business plan. But as far as I'm concerned, you can have your pots back, because I will never use them.
They've got your name on them.
You know, I am not going. And I ended up using them for the shoots a lot, because they're much. I mean, most of my pots are kind of dark inside, and so they look very good on camera, which is why we use them. But I never use them. And my basic.
I'm so glad I asked.
My basic belief about gadgets is they are utterly unnecessary. It's so great not to be a magazine editor anymore, because I was dying to say this the whole time I was at Gourmet, and of course you can't, because all our advertisers are the people who are making the expensive, stupid stoves. I mean, you know, I have the cheapest GE stove you can buy in New York, and a fancy stove, and I mean, I love my cheap stove. I mean, my fancy Wolf stove takes 20 minutes to get up to temperature. My little GE, you know, you hit 350, and 2 minutes later it beeps that it's 250. And, you know, I think that the notion that you need fancy gadgets to cook is just nonsense. You need like a great knife. You don't need a million great knives. You need to go out and figure out what knife is good for your hand, and buy one great knife. You probably need a coffee grinder. I have to admit, I use the coffee pot I've had for 30 years. I mean, I'm absolutely not a gadget person. Probably the one gadget I love best in my kitchen is I have a little spice grinder that, you know, I use a lot of fresh spices, and fresh spices make such a difference. So, and I think it costs $39, but it's indispensable.
Okay. And gifts, what do people give you?
What do people give me? Well, somebody just sent me, and again, he wanted me to test it, but it was a great gift. A pizza steel, you know, one of those steels that you put in your oven and heat up to You put your oven at 500.
What used to be a pizza stone is now
it's now
pizza
a steel, which gets your oven. I mean, it's like you put that pizza on there and it cooks in 7 minutes. It's just fantastic. I really love it. So people tend to give me, things that are newfangled kind of gadgets, mostly useless, but the pizza steel is not
I would
useless.
just think that you would get a lot of presents. Do you get food presents?
Yeah, people give me things that they've made. They might bring me a piece of beautiful cheese that they've found somewhere. I made this jam kind of thing. Yeah.
That's nice.
It is nice.
I'm friends with Renee Fleming, and I bought a pair of black leather gloves once, and after I bought them, I realized that they were made by a company called Renee.
Oh.
And so I brought them to her. I was like, I just bought these gloves. I really want you to have them. Look, they say Renee. And she said, black leather gloves? Are you kidding me? Do you know how many people bring me black leather gloves every single day of my life? And I said, no. And she was like, that's what you give opera singers. Just in case you were wondering, you give them black leather gloves, long ones. They have millions of them. Okay, friends. We will answer questions. I beg of thee, make them questions. Don't be that crazy person who just stands up and rambles on and on. I know that person isn't there tonight, but I like to say it anyway.
Now you've scared everybody
Now
out of asking a question.
But not
They're
her,
afraid they're going to be the crazy
she knows
person.
She's not crazy.
Oh, I'm crazy. Where do you find the joy in food when your husband's diabetic, lactose intolerant, and you have a steady diet of green beans and shredded cardboard and shattered glass? Where do you find the joy in food when you have those?
Well, do you have to eat the same food he eats?
It's easier.
Would he care if you didn't?
No, I cook for him. Unlike you, I like to cook for my husband. But I'm just wondering, where can I find some inspiration where I can't use the dairy products, I can't use all the sugar and all of that stuff. So I'm just wondering, what can I do?
I think that's a really good question, because even if what we're missing is not that thing, I think almost everybody has these blackouts now.
Right.
My husband's gone low carb. I'm a vegetarian. It's hard.
Well, I think you find that farmers markets were made for you. You go to a farmer's market and just, find the most beautiful vegetables. You can do amazing stuff with beautiful fresh vegetables. And for me, the joy in this would be the challenge of, okay, how do I, start substituting tofu for cheese? And I do. I love it.
For you, I'll give it a try.
Actually, mapo tofu is one of the. It's in the book, and it's probably something we eat once a week.
It's all about what's next to it. Tofu on its own it's nothing.
Yeah, it is nothing, but
yeah,
it's kind of a palette. It's just like asking you to be creative with it.
The first piece I ever wrote for you, which I think was in the first issue on the back page, and it was called Let Them Eat Kale. And it was about having a dinner party in which you have the lactose guest, you have the carb guest, you have the no sugar guest, the no meat guest, and that one by one, every single thing is eliminated except for kale.
I have to tell you that in writing this gourmet memoir, I'm not sure it'll stay in the book, but I actually used that because, who would have known in 1999 that kale would be like the coolest food on the
I know. I didn't even eat kale back then, and now kale is the centerpiece of my existence. But also back then, I didn't know how bad it was going to get in terms of having people over. What do you do at Thanksgiving when you have 20 people over and they all have some little weirdness?
They're on their own. I mean,
No catering. No catering to weirdness.
No, I mean, I'm going to make a mountain of food, and you'll eat what you can eat. But I don't think that you can let people start dictating what your menu is. I mean, it's different if you have illness, but I mean, my son has, half his friends are vegans. Well, they'll pick around the table and eat what they can. But
that was a question I didn't ask you. Talk briefly about Nick and the fact that he only ate white things.
Yes. It's a problem.
Son of most famous food person in America.
Everybody thought it was hilarious. I had a kid who only ate 5 white foods. And, he would give up one, and if he took up a new one, he would give up another one. So, I mean, he just very limited diet. And, I have really strong feelings about kid food and what a bad job we do with it in America. And I thought long and hard, and I said to his doctor, do I have to worry about this? The child has never eaten a fruit or a vegetable. And she said, no sane child ever starved himself to death. He's perfectly healthy, relax. And I did, and so it was like, we will sit at the table, and Nick will eat, whatever white thing he can find on our table that will make him happy, and we will eat dinner, and he will see that we get a lot of pleasure out of it. And we are not going to make dinner into a nightmare of you are going to eat your kale. And at some point, food will kick in for him. And at 9, suddenly, he became an omnivore. And interestingly, I was on stage 2 nights ago with Martha Stewart, who for some reason decided to talk about her grandchildren and the food that they eat. She's very proud of the fact. Her grandchildren have never eaten sugar of any kind.
Oh my God.
Never had juice. They drink water and 2% milk, and they have the most wonderful wide-ranging palates. They love sardines and tofu, and she went on, and these kids are 3 and 6, and all I could think was, boy,
just wait.
The reckoning is coming. These kids are going to be out there scarfing up all the sugar they can get when they're not at home.
And how dare that the woman who brought us Christmas cookies extols the virtue of not having one?
Well, this is not her rules. It's her daughter's rules.
Okay.
But she said, they've never eaten sugar.
Damn.
And I just thought, you really don't want to be a food Nazi with your kids.
You heard it here first. Yes.
So I'm wondering what your joy in actually doing the cooking and your years as a critic, what is it like for you to eat out in restaurants? And are there things that drive you crazy in today's restaurant?
Good question.
Oh, there are lots of things that drive me crazy in today's restaurant. The first one being noise. I mean, it's just ridiculous that you go to these restaurants and shout at each other, which makes it very unpleasant. Actually, it's really a pleasure not to be. I'm not a natural critic. I mean, my default isn't, let me find out what's wrong with all of this food. And so it's really nice to go out and just enjoy the experience. Not have this voice in my head saying, you've got to be thinking about, is this the best risotto you ever made? Is it 2 minutes overcooked? Is it? And just be there and enjoy the food. So I love not being a restaurant critic anymore.
It's something that I don't know if you told me this or if I read it in Garlic and Sapphires about your purse that had the baggies in it. Was that in the book?
I don't know. I might have just told you.
Well, just tell them.
So, for years as a restaurant critic, you don't want, I never wanted to eat every bite on my plate. I didn't want to turn into a giant person, which is a problem when you're eating 12 meals a week out, and they tend to be multi-course meals. And if I love food, I would probably eat it all, but a lot of the time you don't. And you don't want the chef to come screaming out of the kitchen and go, why'd you send this full plate back? So I always carried plastic bags in my pocketbook, and when nobody was looking, I would just slide the food into the bag.
Making other people in your family really happy, I would think.
Yes, they would.
Yeah. Yes?
So you seem like you're really open to a lot of different foods. What's the worst thing anybody ever served you? You just couldn't go near?
I've been served a lot of horrible foods, but when Wiley Dufresne first opened WD 50 in New York, he served a dish of whole langoustines with cinnamon on them. And the combination just, I couldn't swallow it. I mean, it was just, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I didn't have a plastic bag with me. And I just sort of surreptitiously threw it under my seat.
I love it that even when something is super disgusting, you're trying to figure out how to be polite about it.
Well, I just didn't want to say, whoa, is this a bad combination?
Yes.
Do you have trouble, like, truly enjoying the food that you prepare? Like, for example, when I cook food, I'm constantly thinking about how I can make it better, how I, whatever. And the people around me have said things like, we're not enjoying what you just prepared for us because we're picking it apart so much.
I pretty much don't do that.
It's really just you.
I think that worked for me, like, okay, maybe I need to try it again.
I mean, sometimes, when I've made something that I really think is a mistake, I can be sitting there cringing and hoping that nobody notices that I'm cringing. But mostly, once the food gets out on the table, I just relax into it. One of the smartest things anyone ever said to me about food, and I really try and keep this as my mantra, is what's the point of knowing a lot about food if all it does is make you not enjoy it? And
Same's true for literature.
yes, yes. And, there is no point in making yourself an expert in this, so you're just saying, well, the olive oil I had 3 weeks ago was a lot better than this olive oil.
Yes.
When you need an escapist read, what do you choose?
Oh, I actually do. I read widely, and I'm not so proud of some of my literary choices. I just finished on the plane. I listened to a lot of audiobooks. I was listening to Carl Hyacin, which was like just enormous fun, but I also I like Jojo Moyes, and probably not something I would shout to the world, but I've probably read everything she's written.
That's good.
Yeah.
There was a question right over here. Did you have a question? Yes.
I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that you developed your recipes yourself. You said you get it from a lot of people.
Right.
But when I have a tendency to change recipes. I'm considering myself a food. I'm great. I always change recipes just a little bit. Like, for instance, I don't think sugar is a huge culprit. I really don't. I don't overdo it, but I always cut that back. And I think American recipes are too sweet. But that's one question. Do you change recipes that people give you?
Oh, all the time. And part of what I want from this book is I'm saying, change them. Don't make them this way. Make them your way. Take these recipes and make them yours.
The other question I had for you is talking about gadgets. I used to have like 75 cookbooks, and I would take them to bed and read them. They were in I got thrown out of my house once. Long story. They were all in my Do I need one of them?
You don't. And I will tell you, they are the scariest things in any kitchen. And when we tested, we used to do this thing at Gourmet where we would test all kinds of gadgets and you say which was the best. When we did mandolins, every single cook got cut. And I have one, I don't use it. It scares.
Well, it kind of scared me. I saw it. Oh, what's that? She goes, "Am I use it?" Oh, it makes great.
And I happen to know someone who took his palm off with one.
Next question. Yes?
What other cookbook authors do you like?
Can I just say, if you come by Parnassus Books, Ruth was there this afternoon, and I said, go into the cookbook section and poll what you like. I want you to answer the question. But as of tomorrow, we're going to have a fantastic display of cookbooks Ruth likes.
Lots of them. I mean, I would say the cookbook writer who was probably most seminal to me and who, if my style follows anything, is Elizabeth David. Because she's she's the cook who just sort of gives you suggestions. She doesn't she doesn't tell you you need X amount of this and X. There is a French author who I think everybody should have his books. Unfortunately, I think only one is translated into English. Edward de Pomian, and he's a book called Cooking in 10 Minutes. He was a scientist in Paris who had a radio show in the 30s, and he has the most sensible advice on cooking you will ever have. And he makes everything seem incredibly easy, and he sort of explains it scientifically, but in a lovely way.
This is a book we can still get?
Yes. French Cooking in 10
Mary
Minutes.
Laura, you on this? Okay.
It's just a fantastic.
That sounds really, really good.
Yeah. And he just says things like, everybody should have some boiled potatoes in the refrigerator, and because then, you can get your potatoes made in no time at all. You just put them in a little oil. He has a recipe for tomatoes in cream, where you just take whole tomatoes and prick them and cook them in a little bit of butter, and you just keep turning them and pushing on them, and in the end you pour some cream over it, and they're incredibly delicious if you've got good tomatoes. And it's nothing, right? Marcella Hazan never, ever lets you down. Her recipes work really well. Paula Wolfert, another person, about the only person I ever met who has a perfect palate. I mean, she's got an amazing palate, and her books are fantastic. Marion Cunningham's breakfast book. What?
To have a perfect palate. I know what perfect pitch means, but I don't know what perfect.
Well, like Billy in Delicious, my character. I mean, Paula is the only person I've ever met who can taste something and tell you what is in it. Just pull the flavors apart.
Okay.
I'm not sure she can anymore since she's suffering from Alzheimer's, but she's remarkable, and those books are beautifully researched. And Dory Greenspan's baking books are fantastic. And probably, my go-to book, the Gourmet Cookbook, the yellow one, I didn't write it, I just edited it, but it's a really good book.
It is a really good book. Yes? You.
What is your most memorable meal, whether at home or out, and what made it so memorable?
Okay, the meal that probably changed my life. My first husband and I got married in a time when nobody got married in the 60s. We got married so we could take all our presents back and go to Europe for as long as possible. And so, this was when you really could be in Europe on $2 a day. And so we stayed for months, but one of our professors had moved to Crete, and as a wedding present, he said, you can come stay with me in Crete for as long as you want. And he had this great place in Hanya, and this deal was I would sort of cook for all of us, and we were there for a while. And one day he said, we're going to take a walk. And we went up this mountain, and we came to this hut, and this beautiful sort of stone hut with a porch on it. And this sort of old lady came out, and she filled a dish with olive oil from her own trees. And she went and picked wild herbs on the mountainside and sprinkled it in. And she picked some tomatoes from her garden and sliced that on a plate with onions and brought out a loaf of bread she'd baked, this big crusty loaf of bread, and left a bottle of wine from her neighbor that he'd made himself. And she said, eat bread and these, tomatoes and onions, and have some wine. I'm going fishing. And she came back with fish, and she built a fire out of olive wood and brushed the fish with olive oil and sprinkled them with wild herbs and grilled them. And for dessert, we had yogurt made from the milk of her own sheep. And, this is 1970, so American food was in a very different place than it is today. And it was the first time I'd ever had food that was absolutely of its place. I mean, everything had come from right there. And I realized I can go back to New York and I can replicate. I mean, I can get a fish and I can grill it, but it won't be this. It won't taste like this. And it was, for me, this moment of one, simple food is what I like best. And two, there really is this notion of terroir. And, food that comes from right where it was grown is going to taste better than anything that we could at that point get in America. And it changed my idea of what a great meal was.
There will be no more questions because that was the perfect final question. Can I say one thing before we go? I bought 7 copies of this book today. This is a book that you're going to want to give to people. It's really extraordinary, and we're so lucky to have you here. So go buy books. Get in line, say hello, have them signed. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you. You've been a great audience. Thank you.
Nice audience.